Uh, Thank you, madam, for giving this opportunity on this platform. Uh, I believe it is very imperative to understand that education as a whole is indeed a dialectical process. Now, no matter where we look, whether it is the Western form of education or our Indian ancient system, our dialectical process had always been there. And we all have a rich legacy of uh, making education in itself a dialectical process. But what do I mean by the dialectics? I'll clear it out. Now, by dialectic, I mean that a conversation on a subject matter may not immediately end where it appears to be concrete. So sometimes it has been observed in the classrooms that uh, we normally have a curriculum. A student may have a bit more inquisitiveness, which goes beyond the lines of the books. There had been instances when maybe as a teacher, due to a time constraint, or more, I would say that it is not time constraint, rather somehow it is our, what should I say? It is in the very history of the tradition that we must not let the student speak beyond what is there in the syllabus. Now, if we stop education or educating, the act of educating, when it comes to the syllabus, then I think we are somehow dealing with what is immediately appearing as a concrete process of education, but we are failing to look beyond where it is going. Because no matter how much we teach or try to teach, we need to understand that what is happening in the should not end within the periphery of the classroom, because we are not teaching for the syllabus. The syllabus is a mere portal to enter the mind of the students. Now, we are here to empower the minds. That is the objective of education. To empower the minds, what we require is language. Now, I'm not, when I'm using the word language, let me clarify that I'm not using the word language insofar the subjects are concerned, like English or Kannada or Bengali or Hindi or French or Spanish. What I'm trying to say is that any language, any subject in itself is a language. History has its own language. Sports is a language. Music is definitely the most global language. Now, when it comes to the language, what we are teaching in the classroom must be expected to have some effect that goes beyond the classroom, so that that can be used by the student in his or her own life. Now, how will that happen if the information is merely disseminated to the student and the student is ceased to question, or is only allowed to question insofar the question is within the domain of the syllabus? Now, if it is done, then it will harm the dialectic. So dialectic over here is, in a Fichtean sense, that it is a thesis. For example, I am teaching a subject matter, a thesis, and there can be a question which may contradict even the teacher's point of view, and which may give birth to certain kinds of conflict. So as a teacher, as an educator, should I try to disavow, should I try to avoid conflict? Because I am not supposed to engage in conflicts with the students. Or we have to question further, why are we disavowing the conflict? Maybe the disavowal is because we have already given a position as a teacher, and the hierarchy of a teacher somehow defines that a student is not supposed to go beyond something. But when it comes to the mind, when it comes to the dialectic of teaching, this dialectic is that the student can pose the contradicting view, which will be acting as an antithesis. And when the conversation will go on, the thesis, antithesis, and maybe another antithesis, a thesis, it will somehow give birth to synthesis. Now, the synthesis is the mediation where both the teacher and the student has somehow, if not resolved everything, but came to a point of mediation of what they're trying to say. Now, I've asked many teachers that when a student tend to ask a question which may seem to be immoral in the very periphery of the classroom, the teacher tries to use a condescending tone to stop the student. The moment you stop the student in asking a question, you cease the dialectical process. If you cease the dialectical process, that what we are teaching in the classroom will never have a symbolic or a mimetic presentation in the student's mind. A question could be, a student may ask, why am I even reading poetry? How will it help me? Now, an easy answer to that would be, which may seem easy, but quite incoherent an answer, that is, because it is in the syllabus and poetry is beautiful, people who write poetry are great poets and great thinkers, so it is giving you a philosophical tenet of how to lead life, or what romance is, or what suffering is. Well, let's go beyond that. Let's look at something more scientific. There is I heard this interview, and the interviewer asked the neurologist, a neurologist from Tamil Nadu, Mr. Ramachandran, who is quite a popular and a famous neurologist practicing in US and UK, I think. He answered a very good, in a very subtle and scientific manner, that why people should read poetry. Because poetry in itself doesn't deal with any fact directly. It is an indirect expression and presentation, which would otherwise seem to be very mundane, can be very mundane and everyday thing. But it is only in poetry that we find that things operate in a symbolic order. Now, what is a poet doing? A poet is not merely giving a prosaic expression of everyday life. That could have been easier. Instead of that, poetry is dealing with a juxtaposition of disparate elements that are coming together. Now, in our life, disparity, conflicts, all these things are the very concomitants of life, as I would say. And we need language in our life to mediate them. So poetry can give the language to mediate issues in your life. Second, poetry enhances the ability to look at disparate elements which are not otherwise associated with each other. They may bear some similitude, but not similarity, and no sameness. But when you're working in an office, you will often deal with situations like this. For example, you are handling a team where the personalities of the people are very different, and you are the leader. You're supposed to lead them. Now, poetry very indirectly will give you this chance of understanding, of realizing everybody's need, and bring them together as a team, as an organic whole, one would say. Now, this is a scientific way of looking at poetry. It has been my experience that when it comes to the dialectics of teaching, we often don't consider the process as a dialectical process at all. We enter the classroom, we iterate what is there in the syllabus, and we give some homework, ask few questions, which we call Socratic method. And then if there is a question by any chance that is not there, or that may seem to be inappropriate. Now, I do not know that who defined appropriate or inappropriate in this manner. It was an opportunity to dig into this while I was dealing with Merchant of Venice with grade 9 or 10 perhaps, and the very effusiveness of the character Antonio towards Bassanio lent to some curiosity among the students that what is Antonio's relationship to Bassanio. Now, one of the girls who was quite gregarious in nature in my class asked me a direct question that, is there an element of homosexuality in Antonio? Now, I asked other teachers how they dealt with it. They said that they have stopped the student immediately because it seemed to be an inappropriate question. But to me, it was not an inappropriate question, rather a question to which the answer lacked appropriation. Now, to give it appropriation, I had to research on the Elizabethan society. What was it? What was the sexual orientation? Nowadays, we are just having hue and cry over all this, and there are multicolored flags, platoons in the classrooms. But if we are really getting progressive, then why should I stop the student? The moment I stop the student, I have stopped the dialectical process. Why? Because the question seemed to be an antithesis to my thesis. But to lend the synthesis, I have to go back and study the societal tenets, the principles of Elizabethan era. What was it? I had to come back to the class and discuss the matter in the classroom. And though there can be an element of fun and frolic in all this, we cannot ignore the fact that the question was quite valid in steering the conversation to something else. But that something else cannot be considered as a thing that is beyond the syllabus and should be stopped. No. Why? Because if the student is taking up sociology, this is something that the student may study. So we all talk about multidisciplinary approach and emotional learning, critical learning, thinking out of the box. I have noticed quite often that you can think out of the box insofar you are obeying the box. And, to take the words of Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, Kant observed this very nicely, that the limitations of the project of enlightenment lies in the enlightenment itself. Because no matter what we do, we need to obey somebody. It's fine. Obedience is okay. But I really do believe that obedience to the self is discipline. But absolute and blind obedience to others can lead to intellectual enslavement. Now, we teachers are here to empower the minds, not to enslave their intellect. If we are really, honestly, trying to enhance their critical thinking, we ourselves have to look at things very critically. We cannot just stop a student condescendingly just because the question is out of syllabus or it may have sounded inappropriate, unparliamentary for some reason. A question is never wrong. The answer can be stupid. We have to understand this. Now, I am working on the essays and papers where I'm trying to look at education through the lens of psychoanalysis, because I study psychoanalysis, and I have often felt this relation that why do we stop a student? Now, gone are those days when the corporal punishment was one of a thing to handle a student. We used to beat up, in fact, lacerate the student, which has led to flaying and bruises on their skin. And this is how to discipline students. That's what we thought. But gone are those days. We are at the receiving end. But still, how do we rule the discourse of a class? We no more beat up a student, but we need to look deep down within as human beings, that just because I'm not beating or slapping, or I am not given that opportunity to handle students in that manner, have I calmed down? No, because aggression in itself is a primordial operation of human psyche. It is still working within us. So what do? We control the overall discourse of the class. That I'll not beat you, I'll not hit you. But insofar the collective discourse, the conversation is concerned, I will control the words that are taking place in the class. You will be able to speak, but only when I allow you to speak. You will be able to speak insofar I agree with your point. You will be able to speak insofar it is within the parliamentary domain of my words, knowledge, or ideas. If a teacher is not upgrading himself or herself, it is impossible for that person to upgrade the students, the ideas, the concepts. the students need more exposure. And when I say exposure, I do not mean only the objectal or the objects around us. Nowadays, we have technology in the class. So definitely we have to use it wisely. But no matter how much technology or whatever we use in the class, at the end of the day, a dialectics is a human process. It is a process between two human beings or more than that. So when I bring psychoanalysis to this, I'm trying to find out how the ego of a person or of a teacher is working or operating in the classroom. And I have observed it quite often that it becomes somehow very pertinent for the teacher to seize the act of a student, even though it is not so, it cannot be claimed as something disobedient. To curb or curtail the natural movement of a student. Have we ever dealt with the fact that why it is indeed a student is unable to perform good in a particular subject? And we tend to react quite in an inhuman manner. Then again, I'm saying this inhuman way is not the way that it used to be, because we are not supposed to hit or beat a student. But insofar the words are concerned, what we articulate, sometimes we deal in a very inhuman manner with the students. We tend to make them feel that if you are not good with my subject, then somehow you are lacking a lot. That may not be the thing. There is a footballer in the class, there is an entrepreneur in the class, there is a cricketer, there is a mechanical engineer. All of them are different, and we are dealing with variance. We should not try to impose uniformity. We always have this tendency to impose uniformity in a class. Everybody should walk in the same manner, everybody should talk in the same manner. Yes, it becomes easier for us, but that's not the way to educate people. We have to remember that training is not education. We are somehow getting confused between these words. Training is only language of acceptance. When you are trained as an army, you cannot say no to your commander. But education gives you both acceptance and rejection at the same time. If you do not give the language of rejection, then how can you claim that it is critical thinking? If a person is thinking critically or is supposed to think critically, then I believe that that person has all the right to cause a conflict or contradiction. And why can't we take it happily? Because this contradiction can meander into things that are beyond the lines. And I really believe...
Mr. Sutirtha.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a couple of questions, actually 14 questions lined up here.
All right, ma'am.
And if you're ready, we can start the question answer round. Do you have anything else to mention?
Sure. No, it's fine. I just believe at the end of the day, I can only, posit myself in a position where I believe that conflict should be encouraged, because without the conflict, without encouraging a conflict or language of conflict, the conflict in actual life cannot be mediated. So yes, I can take up the questions.
Right, sir. So the first question is, the audience wants to know about yourself. Please tell us about yourself and what made you take an interest in this topic.
Oh, all right. I think the audience is aware of my name. I'm Sutirtha Chatterjee. I'm from Kolkata, Calcutta, whatever. So I had been teaching, and I had also deployed corporate training. It has almost been 9 years, and not recently, but 2 years ago, I took up psychology, and I went beyond academic psychology. I study psychoanalysis, that is meta psychology, and I am a voracious reader of philosophy as well. So yes, I think I got interested in this topic after reading Jacques Lacan. Jacques Lacan was a French post-structuralist psychoanalyst and a philosopher. So he said that in analysis or a psychological therapy, it is a dialectical process. And when I read Jacques Lacan, I readily understood that it is not only therapy, but in a sense, any conversation that has an objective is indeed a dialectical process. So if you even take up Gita, you will see that it is a dialectic between Krishna and Arjuna, and they are dealing with certain subject matters which are quite pertinent subject matters, like aggression, what it is. You look at Hegel, it's completely a dialectical process. So I think we have to understand and we have to give value that insofar the interaction, we always look for interactive classes, but we need to question what is this interaction. And so I think that motivated me.
Interesting, sir. So how can a teacher utilize the dialectical method in resolving issues in a school setup?
Oh, it's not so difficult. First of all, we teachers, I already talked about the hierarchical image of an education. Now, I also hear teachers saying that nowadays students don't talk the way we used to do. Now, my question is, why should they? Because let's look at, again, Kleinian theory, which is psychoanalysis, that we project our demands or our wishes, our desire, because something got introjected. What is introjection? So basically, what the mind captures subconsciously is introjection. So the teachers who are demanding the students to behave in a certain way has an introjected image of their teachers, how they used to behave with them. And somehow, subconsciously, they expect the same from the students. The dialectical process can only work if we can truncate, if not truncate, rather mediate the language in our ego in itself, the reality principle. By ego, I am taking the Freudian notion of ego, the reality principle, that what is in itself the reality when it comes to education, what is my position? Why should I demand respect? Respect has nothing to do. What we can do, what we can demand, not demand, rather expect, is cooperation from the students. And sometimes you have to understand that the students are much more inquisitive than we are. The dialectics can only be, the dialectical process can only be fruitful if we keep on reading and try to question our ego and what we project and what we introject. We need to be aware of the fact that whether we are imposing by projecting whatever that has got introjected in our mind, what we are working is a structure of love and adoration. If a student doesn't adore you, that person will never respect you. That what would appear as respect is nothing but an element of fear working in the maxim of reverence. So the success of dialectics lies in understanding each other. It is very human, more human than it seems to be.
So have you implemented some of these ideas in your classroom situation, sir?
Absolutely, ma'am. I told you one of the what I faced with Merchant of Venice. So I did not stop the student from asking me such a question about homosexuality, though I was, because it is a very pertinent question, and we are having parades and all these nowadays. So if I stop the question, where do I stand? And I always encourage, I tell my students, look, the idea begins where the lines end. You have to extrapolate ideas from the book. I mean, somehow the examinations demand that you may have to repeat the exact lines. And it is very memory based. You remember things, you regurgitate, and the exam is fine. It goes on. But when it comes to real life situations, you have to be analytic in your approach. The situation in itself doesn't have the answers. You have to extrapolate ideas. And it can only be done if the dialectics is working properly and if the subject is operating in a symbolic level, that something represents something else. So I always try to do that in the class. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but once you get habituated, you will see it is more fun.
Right. So isn't this similar to a Socratic method of dialogue to discover the truth?
What we call over here the Socratic method is normally in education, as it trickled down and got diluted into questioning, that I will be questioning what I have taught. The problem is what we question, in most cases, the answers are directly in there. So I give you a comprehension passage and I asked you certain questions which you can directly pick up from the comprehension. But the actual Socratic method is I give you a passage, none of the answers are there, but you try to relate the passage or certain portions or words of the passage to real life situations. There lies the proper Socratic method. We have used the word Socratic method just for questioning, but we did not probe into the fact what Socrates meant by questioning. What kind of questions you need to set? It has to go beyond the periphery of the so-called syllabus.
Right. So, but isn't the need to teach the syllabus a big constraint on teachers in trying out new ideas, sir?
Yes, it is. It is definitely a need, but it is not the only need. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
that's not the only way you believe it.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, syllabus is the first thing that you finish.
Right.
The book is given to you. You're dealing with it. You're giving the questions that will come, and you make it clear in the class. I tend to make it clear in the class. Look, this is a preparation for the exam. But the other thing that we are doing is the preparation for the mind. That why am I doing it? Why is a big question, and people have questioned it, and all the great people that you see, we can name anybody, the Indian ancient sages to the Western philosophers, they have always asked the question why it is happening. Wittgenstein questioned why do I need to use mathematics when it comes to engineering? And that's why the Tractatus Philosophius came up. And so if that is proper critical thinking.
Right. So this question is particularly from a school head, sir. Okay. So as a head of a school, how I can get my teachers to follow a dialectical process? Is there any training or workshop that we can conduct? Will you be able to help us with this?
Oh, sure. I'll be able to help you with that. I can deploy workshops. Because I'm trying to write papers down and all these things, because I'm researching on it. Because I readily believe that the teacher-student relationship is Sigmund Freud said that after the parents, it is only the teacher that remains in the minds of the student. And even after 50 years, 60 years, when the student is old, if there is one teacher that has motivated them, inspired them, and asked them to do something differently, that worked in their life, that may have seemed not so functional, as I said, almost, that what immediately appears seem to be the concrete, but it is not the concrete. So I believe the role of a teacher is very important. Yes, sir. I mean, sir, ma'am, whoever asked that question, yes, I can help you out with that, definitely.
Right. So do you think your approach may be better suited for schools following international curriculum, as it gives more space to the teacher to plan the way of course delivery?
Ma'am, I believe that whether it is international curriculum or a national curriculum like CBSE, ICSE, the process remains the same. It is not about the curriculum. It is about the approach of the teacher. Okay. It is definitely about the approach of the teacher. Even with an international curriculum, you can limit yourself to the syllabus. We should not get confused between the curriculum and the syllabus. Right. The dialectics is a part of the curriculum, but not of the syllabus.
Right. So for a teacher who is used to teaching the same way year after year, what is the motivation to try out new ideas?
Well, first of all, the motivation is let the teacher ask herself or himself whether he or she enjoys it or not. I was listening to an interview of a teacher from Finland, and she was asked that, how do you conduct, a great class? What do you mean by a great class? And she readily said that, I'm giving again the theory of projection, that when you are happy and you are taking a class, you project that happiness on students. It's like a performance, that you are on the stage, you are playing a guitar, and the audience is raising their hands. So a class should be like that. The motivation, first of all, is let that person ask, why is he or she teaching in the first place? What is the objective of it? So if I took up teaching because I cannot do anything else, which George Bernard Shaw once criticized the teachers by saying that the people, those who teach are the people who can't do. So if it is the case, then there is a problem. So let's ask ourselves why we are here in teaching. What is the objective? It's not a target, it's an objective. Target is very visible. It's like throwing a dart, there's a target. Objective is getting diffused every day. So we are dealing with something beyond the physical. It is a metaphysical concept. Let the teacher be clear about that. The teacher can be talked about, or we can use the very hackneyed words like counseled and all these things. And yes, I think the teacher can be motivated. It's not that. Just let the teacher know that you're doing a great job and how that great job can be done.
I agree. So you have taught in several schools over the years. Does the type of school and management make a difference to the way teachers can teach?
Oh, yes, it does. It does. Of course, it does. Because if the management is very orthodox in their way, then it can be a problem. I mean,
it will limit your,
yeah, it will limit your creativity. Definitely.
True. And so in a dialectical method, will need to be outspoken. What if the student has fear of public speaking? Oh, exactly. I mean, it is only through a dialectical method you can solve these issues, because I deal with students every day, and that's where I bring the psychology, psychoanalysis, that what kind of a personality type the student is. And we need to address the issue. I'm telling you a very short story about this, that I caught this because I read psychoanalysis, perhaps, that the student was unable to speak in public. When it came to one-to-one conversation, she was fine. But when it came to public speaking, she kept on stammering. And while probing into it, I took time and I kept on talking to her. And then it opened up that the problem lied in the family. It was completely a familial issue that actually, affected the speech of the student. So I had to, analyze the student and provide her the language, and it mediated to a great extent. But then again, I say, before all this, why would a student open up to you? Only when he or she feels that you are the person who can be trusted. You're not an egoistic person. I mean, the information is safe with you. Right, sir. But in a dialectic method, there is often no right answer, and some students dislike this. What happens then?
Okay, the student dislike that there is no right answer, because we always say that there is right answer in the examination.
Okay.
So a student looks at it from the perspective of examination, and we teachers do that. I mean, we cannot step back. We often say, no, this is not for education is not only for examination, but at the end of the day, it boils to that, because even the parents, they look at marks. So yeah, we need to be diplomatic over here. But believe me, dialectical process is not a mechanical process. It is a very emotional and human process. It is pertinent to make the student fall in love with the dialectics, that he would not like to end the conversation. Just, we have to be diplomatic about the fact that what are we preparing for the exam? That is the preparation for exam. And dialectics is a preparation for life, which we are extrapolating from the books.
Okay. So could you tell us why you have combined dialectic and psychoanalysis together in this topic? What is the main goal of the talk, sir?
Okay, the main goal of the talk is this, that I have also attended, as a teacher, I have to attend trainings and all, how a teacher should deal with students, the discipline and this and that. But well, I feel, they come to quite a sharp contradiction when I read the philosophers. Like, what is discipline in itself? What is obedience? What we want from the students? When we are talking about interactive, everybody is talking about interaction. The class should be interactive. The people should use technology. and all this. Now, look how we can manipulate technology in a way. And when I use the word manipulate, I use the negative connotation of it. That well, if you are really required to use a PPT and you use the PPT, you can actually cut down the conversation by using PPT. You just show the PPT because we are visual. Our visual is the prime, the most powerful medium. So if the visual is satisfied by PPT and one video, we often think that the class had been taken. But now let's engage the students in a conversation and let's see what the students actually extrapolated from the class. You will feel it's quite a void. Why? Because the visual is not given. So we have to deal with both, in which the visual, the auditory can be given, and when it is not given. Now, in the midst of this, there is always an impasse, a suspension, an abeyance of things. In this abeyance, the dialectics work. I have chosen the dialectical process to mediate this impasse that gets created. Created in the midst of what we call interaction and the usage of technology, or the non-usage of technology, or the non-usage of interaction. So all these things can be combined and mediated through a dialectical process.
Okay, sir. It was a very interesting and informative session. We end the question answer round now, and School Journal of Education and schoolreformer.com, thank you for the talk and for patiently answering all the questions. We also thank the audience for participating in the event. We will end the session now, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks the audience for such patient listening. Thank you, ma'am, for giving me the opportunity. Please let me know if there is any other educator who would like to contact me for anything.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Have a nice day.